All right, hi everyone. This is Kaylee here.
And this is Phil.
So we're the two U.S. Medical Affairs Fellows here at Pharmacyclics out in Sunnyvale, California. So we're here tonight to host the 2019 KGI Pharmaceutical Fellowship webinar. So we just wanted to take the time to thank you all so much for joining us tonight. Our webinar is going to be pretty casual. We're going to be spending about a little less than an hour just to focus on the unique structure of KGI's fellowship program. But tonight we're focusing specifically on Pharmacyclics, mostly because we'll be here recruiting for two medical affairs fellows to join us next year. And so without further ado, I'll go ahead and pass it to Phil to kick off our webinar tonight.
Hello everyone, thank you again for being here. Here's the agenda for tonight's webinar. First we'll do some introductions, then I'll discuss the Keck Graduate Institute Pharmaceutical Fellowship Program. Then Kaylee will go into details about Pharmacyclics and why you should join our medical affairs team. Finally, we'll talk about the application process and some outside resources to help prepare you for mid-year. Today's presentation is specifically covering KGI's program in Pharmacyclics rather than a general functional area informational webinar. Those resources are available through MCPHS or Rutgers. They have great informational webinars available, and we'd encourage you to check those out if you're interested. For any questions that you might have, feel free to type them in the chat box located on the Zoom box at the very top of your screen. Please click to everyone so that I can see them, and we'll answer them at the end of the session. Now for introductions.
All right, so hey guys, so I'm Kaylee. So I'm one of the U.S. Medical Affairs Fellows focused in scientific communications at Pharmacyclics. I graduated from the University of Michigan, but I'm a Bay Area native. So I completed my undergraduate training at UC San Diego, and so now I'm back home in the Bay Area.
Hey guys, I'm Phil. I went to the University of Maryland School of Pharmacy. I did my undergraduate training at University of Maryland College Park. I'm currently the other first-year U.S. Medical Affairs Fellow at Pharmacyclics, but I'm specifically working with the Health Economics and Outcomes Research team. Before we get started, I wanted to introduce our fellowship director, Bernard Tyrell. He joined KGI in 2017 and is currently the Associate Dean for Pharmacy and Industry Relation for Administrative Sciences. He serves as our fellowship director on the academic side. Before his current role at KGI, he served as the fellowship program director at MCPHS for 4 years. And prior to that, he spent 34 years in the biopharmaceutical industry, where he worked his way up from sales representative to senior vice president. He worked across multiple therapeutic areas with companies like Eli Lilly, Johnson & Johnson, and AstraZeneca. Now on to an overview of the KGI Pharmaceutical Fellowship Program. The KGI Fellowship Program was founded in 2018 in Southern California with a mission of developing strong, confident, and competent biopharmaceutical industry leaders. The objective of this program is to provide hands-on training in functions fundamental to bringing innovative medical products, including medical devices, through development and into commercialization through work experience. The hope is that fellows will develop an understanding of how companies operate with the 90-10 structure. And what I mean by the 90-10 structure is that fellows will spend 90% of their time on duties specific to the industry site, the sponsor company, and 10% of their time on academic development, which I'll get into in the later slides. I personally think that this is great because we get to spend 2 years on site at the company while also developing our academic side. And through this program, they foster professional development, they provide hands-on training, and exposes us to a variety of industry and academia-based opportunities. And currently, we have 9 KGI fellows across the West Coast as well as the Midwest. We do have multiple companies partnered with KGI, but a lot of them and most of them are on their off cycle and recruit every other year. Pharmacyclics is the one exception this year in that our medical director is hoping to have a first and second year fellow every year. So we're currently recruiting 2 U.S. Medical Affairs Fellows as Kaylee and I start our second year. And getting into our partner companies, at Profusa, which is a medical device company in the Bay Area, we have Chloe and Taylor, who are both on the medical affairs team. At Pharmacyclics, of course, we have myself as well as Kaylee. And down in Southern California, we have Ricky at Gilead doing a unique supply chain fellowship. And in the Midwest, we have Maggie at our parent company, Abbey, in Chicago. She's currently doing a medical affairs fellowship in gastroenterology. And also near Chicago, we have our Advocacy fellows. And Advocacy is the gene therapy company and the subsidiary of Novartis. From left to right, we have Amy, Chris, and Anish. Amy is the medical information fellow. Chris is the scientific communications fellow, and Anish is the HEOR fellow over at Advocacy. And getting more into the KGI fellowship structure, again, we go by the 90-10 structure, 90% of your time with the company and 10% of the time for academic development opportunities. These academic requirements include annual publications, either done through KGI or your company, professional development days, which are twice a year on topics that the fellows and their managers choose, bi-weekly conference calls with Dr. Tyrell and the fellows, KGI preceptor calls as necessary, and another component of KGI is to complete a teaching certificate, and if interested, the opportunity to precept IPI and Abbey students. The teaching certificate program, Kaylee and I are currently pursuing our teaching certificate program through the UCSF School of Pharmacy. The program is designed to support the development of residents and fellows in small group cases, large group lectures, and experiential education throughout the year. There's going to be 6 teaching workshops covering topics such as how to effectively lead small group sessions, case writing and design, providing effective feedback, and setting goals and expectations for your IPI and Abbey students. These are taught by professors to the residents and the fellows. The residents and fellows are also assigned to a course within the School of Pharmacy to facilitate small group learnings of therapeutic concepts for approximately 10 weeks, and that's weekly. I recently completed my small group session on endocrinology, where I led 2 groups, about 15 students in each of the groups through cases. I think it was a great experience being on the other side, being able to teach students. We're also assigned at least one large group teaching session for student pharmacists, ranging from around 1 to 3 hours in length. And we work directly with the course director to develop session objectives, develop an educational strategy, and develop associated materials. After the lecture, we receive feedback from both the students as well as the course directors. Kaylee recently presented her lecture in the beginning of October on Intro to Cell Cycle Development to kick off an oncology elective. She worked with both PCYCs and course coordinators to develop her slide deck, do a dry run of her presentation, and eventually present to the class. And in the middle, that's Mandy Morris, who leads the PGY1 residency program. She also leads the teaching certificate program. The fellows are also paired with an academic preceptor from KGI. They serve as an additional resource and mentor for any clinical related questions you may have, with opportunities to work with them on projects. Tanya Stewart, pictured here, is our academic preceptor, and she checks in with us about every month or as frequently as bi-weekly. It's as needed. And we're planning on visiting Tanya to shadow at an oncology clinic in the spring, and we'll also be giving a lecture in her Heme-Onc elective. As far as professional development days, through KGI, we have these PDDs, which are semi-annually. These are a chance for fellows to all meet up, and the main purpose of these is to discuss topics relevant to the fellows. And again, as I stated previously, these topics are decided by fellows and their managers. They're hosted by one of the fellowship companies, and so it's a great opportunity to network from people from that company. And not only that, but to catch up with other fellows and to get dinner and drinks. Now I'll hand it over to Kaylee to discuss Pharmacyclics and our fellowship program.
All right, thanks, Phil. Hi, everyone. So to give you a quick run through of our company, Pharmacyclics Abbey is a biopharmaceutical company focused in oncology and currently based in Sunnyvale, California. We're right in the heart of Silicon Valley. Our primary product that we work on is Imbruvica, also known as ibrutinib, which is jointly owned by Janssen Biotech Incorporated. So Imbruvica, what it is essentially a potent Bruton tyrosine kinase inhibitor that targets B-cell pathon or hematological malignancies. Imbruvica was the first BTK inhibitor on the market and since has obtained 10 FDA approvals across 6 disease areas and is approved in more than 95 countries and has treated more than 135,000 patients globally. In recognizing the incredible impact of the BTK inhibitors in oncology, our company is committed to fully exploring the potential of Imbruvica and its unique mechanism of action in tumor cells. So at the moment, we have more than 150 ongoing clinical trials that we work on. So unlike other company pipelines that may consist of multiple new products, our company's pipeline is focused within Imbruvica in the disease areas that it can potentially target. So as a student and local Bay Area native, I remember what really caught my attention initially about Pharmacyclics back in the days was when it was first acquired by Abbey back in 2015. I thought what made this acquisition stand out to me was that Abbey acquired Pharmacyclics for a whopping $21 billion, making it one of the largest acquisitions in the Silicon Valley. So to this day, Pharmacyclics and the excitement behind Imbruvica's potential continues to have a large footprint in the Bay Area. All right, so we wanted to introduce you to our U.S. medical affairs structure and some of the people you might be seeing next year. So Pharmacyclics Medical Affairs is uniquely composed of 9 sub-functions within that are listed here. A huge part of what brought me to Pharmacyclics is essentially the people and the leadership here. So first person you see at the top right corner is Rula Kakish. She is Vice President of Medical Affairs and serves as the main preceptor for the incoming fellows and for the fellowship program at Pharmacyclics. So as fellows, we meet with her about twice a month to ensure alignment on the fellows program and overall goals. Based on the candidate's interest, a direct preceptor will be assigned to meet with the fellow regularly on more of a day-to-day to weekly basis. So for example, Reethi, who's listed in the second box, is the Director of Health Economics and Outcomes Research, and she serves as Philip's preceptor, while Tony, who's Head of Scientific Communications, Knowledge Management, and Medical Information. It's a huge title, so he's my preceptor. And so the incoming fellow will try to identify an area of interest for them and try to find a preceptor that aligns with what that interest is. And so personally, unique to my experience in pharma, I love that Pharmacyclics has a huge PharmD presence and is even headed by Rula, who's PharmD by training as well. Being a fellow at a company with a strong PharmD presence and executive leadership able to advocate for the program has really shaped the culture and work of the fellowship. And so being at a relatively more lean company, outside of my own work, fellows help support various functions and cross-cover when team members are out of office or in need of additional support. And so I think as just an incoming fellow and being so new in my career, this has greatly helped me gain a better understanding of how medical affairs department as a whole operates. And so before we switch over to the next slide, I wanted to give you a better sense of what an incoming fellow can expect in terms of the structure of the program. So here you look at the 9 different functions that are listed within our medical affairs department. And the way our fellowship program is really designed is that during our first year, the fellow will develop a broad foundational understanding across the medical affairs department as a whole. And so you get exposure to somewhere around the 9. And so based on your interest of the incoming fellow, year 2 will really focus on depth. While our program is listed as a 1 to 2 year fellowship on paper, we strongly recommend and look for a 2-year commitment from our candidates. In order to successfully matriculate out of the program, our preceptors recognize the need for fellows to not only have a good understanding and exposure to various Med-Affair functions, but to also have ownership over large-scale projects, which really comes with specialization that's provided during year 2. So the area of specialization is driven by both the interests of the fellow along with the business needs of the company. All right, so a common question that Phil and I tend to get is, so what do you do from a day-to-day basis? Or what is it exactly that you do as a U.S. Medical Affairs Fellow? With every pharmaceutical company, you get, even within medical affairs, they're all very different. So wanted to take a time for Phil and I just to talk a little bit about the types of projects we work on. So I'll go ahead and let Phil kickstart us off.
All right, just to give you guys a high-level overview, I won't be going too in-depth, but I'll give you guys a good idea of what I do. And I might be using a couple of buzzwords, so bear with me. I work with the medical strategy and evidence generation team, as well as the clinical value and outcomes team, and the global publications team. Under medical strategy, that's where health economics and outcomes research sits. And some of the projects I do for them are conducting pharmacoeconomic analyses, looking at clinical, economic, and humanistic outcomes in collaboration with vendors. I'm also involved in strategic alignment of these studies and for planning of future studies to make sure they align with the business needs of the company and are looking at the correct outcomes. And because we're partnered with Janssen, I work closely with them on studies they're conducting as well. I also work internally with our clinical values and outcomes team. Those are the outcomes liaisons who work with payers in disseminating the information that the health economics and outcomes research creates. So what I really wanted in my fellowship was that journey from data generation to data dissemination. So these two functions really helped me see that through. And with the clinical value and outcomes research, again, they're the end goal of our studies. So it's important that we align with them as well. As for global publications, I work with them to ensure that the data created by the health economics outcomes research team goes to the right congresses, as well as the research that I'm currently doing, like systematic literature reviews, to make sure that we're going to be hitting the right population. That's a little bit about what I do, and I'll turn it back over to Kaylee about what she does.
All right, so what my focus is within medical affairs is actually quite different from Phil. I do have a piece of health economics and outcomes research component involved with a global publication that I'm doing and presenting at ISPOR 2020 potentially. But a lot of what my work entails is really falls into the 3 buckets that you see on the far right. So it's medical review, knowledge management, and medical information. And so to give you a better sense of what that looks like, so with medical review, it's the first point I have there, which consists of material approval and review committee. So what that means is that I support a lot of our team that works on the field. So I help create and review tools that are field teams like the MSLs, or we call them CVOLs, and what that is essentially are MSLs who talk with insurance companies and payers. So I help support them by creating and reviewing tools to help them when educating and speaking with either physicians, pharmacists, or insurance companies. And so going through that process with vendors that we outsource and going through the entire process from start to finish and supporting those teams. But I would say a bulk of my time really falls into what we call knowledge management. I've seen this called medical strategy at other companies, but the reason why we call it knowledge management, which is very unique to Pharmacyclics, is because there's a huge education component that's also intertwined. So in the medical strategy component, we really focus a lot on Congress strategy and planning. And so Congress is this really fancy word that as students, we always hear as conferences, and once you get into pharma, for some reason, we start calling them congresses. But they're essentially these huge shows, these huge events that all pharmaceutical companies come to that are generally therapeutic area focused. And a lot of what we do is understanding when we make a presence at these conferences, what is the message that we want people to take away when they come and stop by our booth? what is it that we want physicians or anyone who comes by our booth to really take home with them and to understand about our company and our drug and where we are at this time. And so for me, when I first started, it seemed very straightforward, but this involves a ton of competitive intelligence because a lot of what we do is shaped by what our competitors are doing and what data they have that talks about us. So it's been a really exciting but very steep learning curve for me that is something that I hope to continue on in my year 2. Another component I enjoy is the education part that I talked about. So this is a lot of our internal training when new publications come out, being able to read through, distill, and be able to disseminate that information quickly and concisely to our medical affairs team and our company as a whole is something that knowledge management is also responsible for. And one point I put on there as well at the end is something that I personally really enjoy about the position, which is compendia, which is where I sit in the compendia strategy committee. And so what compendia means for us, compendia essentially is a term that describes just a wealth of information located in one area. And so for us, what that looks like is the NCCN guidelines. So as a student on rotations, I'm sure some of you may have come across the NCCN guidelines on your oncology rotations. A lot of what we consider as the gold standard of oncology care is what we refer to as the NCCN guidelines. So having seen that as a student and now coming to Pharmacyclics, we get to see the back end of NCCN guidelines. So we're looking at data that's being published on behalf of our company, as well as clinical trial readouts that we're anticipating. Looking at the data that's been presented that we have in front of us and trying to make that decision on whether or not the data is mature, whether it actually impacts patient care, whether it's a significant impact, a meaningful clinical impact, and if it is, then being able to submit it to NCCN guideline committee to actually update those guidelines. And so it's been cool getting to see both ends of it, and it's something that's part of medical affairs at Pharmacyclics. And finally, medical information is also a part of the scientific communication team where we work on standard response letters. And so I would say based on the incoming fellows' interest, a lot of it in terms of how much time I spend on each is dependent on interest. And so I think that would hold true for the incoming fellow as well. A lot of it is driven by interest as we generally have a business need for, I would say, all of these functional areas or sub-functions within. All right, so now we're going to move on to compensation. So similar to based on our unique 90-10 KGI fellowship structure, compensation is similarly aligned. The incoming 2020 fellow will receive an annual salary of $79,000. All health benefits will be received via the Keck Graduate Institute, and fellows traveling are determined by the business need, and if it aligns, then expenses will be supported by Pharmacyclics via the KGI reimbursement process. The KGI contract may vary depending on the sponsoring company, so it's important to ask clarifying questions with each sponsoring company involved with KGI.
And I want to clarify business need, meaning these congresses, either presenting, going to our professional development days, anything else, Kaylee?
No, you're right. We find ourselves actually traveling quite a bit, whether it be we're presenting different publications or like I talked about some of the Congress planning that we do throughout the year, being involved in that type of work. The fellows also expected to come and join along and to be a part of that field interaction as well to really help develop that whole cycle experience. Yeah. Our preceptors are pretty adamant about understanding about the whole process. They don't want us to just jump in the middle of something and kind of have to pick up where everyone's already worked through, but they're intentionally looking for opportunities where we can start from beginning and see it through to the end. And so what that looks like is generally attending offsite as well.
Yeah, so a lot of HEMONC congresses as well as payer congresses.
All right, and then here's another exciting thing I wanted to share. So outside of our day-to-day work life, one thing I'm excited to highlight is the recent launch of our Women Leaders in Action West Coast branch at Pharmacyclics. WLA is one of 7 Abbey employee resource groups, or what we call ERGs at Abbey, that provides opportunities for emerging women leaders to engage with sponsors, provides women with skills, networks, mentors, resources, and just an inclusive culture they need to be successful at work and at home. Diversity of culture, thought, gender is strongly supported by Abbey. At Pharmacyclics, over 50% of our executive board comprises of women, And so I'm personally really excited to see the potential of our new WLA West Coast branch. Additionally, I wanted to highlight the other 6 employee resource groups we have at Abbey, including Abbey Pride, Abbey Veterans, the Black Business Network, our Hispanic and Latino group, individuals with disabilities, and our Asian Leadership Network. All right, and with patient advocacy, I think some of you might have seen that in our sub-function group under medical affairs. This is something that's really unique to Pharmacyclics, where we have our patient advocacy and professional societies group positioned within medical affairs. So at Pharmacyclics, our motto is that we strive to bring back the magic of normal to patients. What that means is that our company is a patient-first, science-based, and employee-driven. As a company, we recognize the importance of not only developing life-saving treatments for patients with cancer, but also to understand the patient journey. So as such, our Light the Night event by the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society is an event that Pharmacyclics is strongly involved in nationally. So as a fellow coming from pharmacy school, where we have direct patient encounters in the clinic and in the community setting, to a setting where we're in industry and a little bit more removed from patients and providing that indirect care, I greatly appreciate all the opportunities that the fellowship and company provides employees to be involved in advocacy, both with patients and professional societies. So that's something that I found really unique about Pharmacyclics that additionally drew me to the company. I think doing our day-to-day work, whether it be supporting the field team, doing medical reviews, planning for congresses, or even the work when Phil looks at real-world data and evidence generation, we're so far removed from patients that I think oftentimes we know why we're doing it, but to actually be at events where we see patients, we hear their stories, we're at these physician professional societies where we hear what physicians are seeing in clinic. Hearing and being at these types of events, I think, have been really powerful in the way that it helps us reconnect with patients and helps us better understand why we're doing the things that we're doing every day. And just a quick plug, our upcoming Light the Night walk is actually happening this upcoming Wednesday, November 13th in San Francisco. So if any of you will be there, you can catch us there as well. And so now we're going to the fun stuff. So what I love most about Pharmacyclics is the culture. Culture is something that you'll probably ask a lot about throughout your interviews and that you should ask about because it varies so differently from every company. So Phil and I wanted to take the time to really show you a little bit about the culture at Pharmacyclics. It's a little wacky, but it's why we love it. So the way I describe the medical affairs team at Pharmacyclics is that we're a very high energy, high performing, and highly collaborative group of people. So whether that means being highly collaborative over work projects or even crazy fun projects. We have a culture that recognizes we have a very dynamic life both at work and outside of work. So we do our best to really celebrate those milestones with one another. So basically, we love to party, and we love excuses to celebrate each other and to have fun, essentially, at the office. So if you look at the pictures here, on our far left, we have a surprise bridal shower. All the way in the middle top, we have our, it was another surprise 10-year anniversary. We were kind of going for the office theme where we were like wrapping stuff with what is it, gift wrap and doing that kind of banner, but it just got out of control and it was all became very meticulously wrapped by pharmacists and it just looked too perfect. And then we have everything from team dinners to surprise baby showers. And of course, being in the Bay Area, we have a lot of really great concerts. So we also have a summer Odessa concert that we attended at Stanford with a few of our coworkers. And then another photo we have is, if you look at the top left, we have our Abbey Week of Possibilities. This is a week in the summer where all employees are encouraged by Abbey to just give back to the community in any way we can, and there are various events throughout the week. And so one thing that Phil and I participated in was an event where we helped remodel an elementary school out in Atherton, California. In the photo, you see some of our coworkers along with our summer interns that all joined in on the event with us. Additionally, we have team outings and lunches. You can see a massive dosa in the top right corner we have, even to random happy hours. And there's a scarecrow on my arm that was like part of this interactive zoo at our company's summer picnic. So essentially what the photos are showing is that at Pharmacyclics, they recognize the importance of teamwork and collaboration that's fostered not only within work, but also outside of work. So Phil and I have had a great opportunity getting to know our coworkers, our summer interns, and people at the company, and networking just through all these different types of opportunities to see each other outside of work. All right, and so now I'm gonna pass it back on to Phil, where he'll talk to you a little bit more about our application process and what to expect in the upcoming weeks.
All right, to be an eligible candidate, you must be a PharmD graduate, be authorized to work in the US, be registered for ASHP midyear to apply to our fellowship program, and attend the formal interview process, which I'll discuss in the next slide. All pretty standard stuff. HEMONC experience or interest is a plus, but it's definitely not required. As far as the application timeline, PPS portal is already open. It opened October 23rd, and our deadline for applications is November 27th. Our Pharmacyclics deadline is November 27th at midnight. Throughout this process, we'll be phone screening candidates up until December 4th, which is when we'll notify all applicants of next steps. Then hopefully we'll see you at ASHP midyear for interviews, and then following midyear, we'll send out invites for on-site interviews, tentatively sometime in early January, and send out offers in the end of January at the latest. And
so just going off that, I know our timeline is a bit later than most programs you'll hear of, being that early mid-January when you might hear back from us after mid-year. This is what we wanted just to set the expectation, but we're really going to try our best to push it earlier if possible. But we just wanted to make this clear for everyone for now.
And if anyone has any questions, feel free to write any questions in the chat box.
Yes, ask questions if you have any, and we'll be sure to answer them after once we're done speaking.
Okay, and then finally, before we end, I want to hand it back over to Kaylee for resources for midyear.
Yep, awesome. So this is our last slide, and before we end, we definitely wanted, yeah, this one. Okay. Yeah, so before we end, we definitely wanted to share some great resources that we wanted to provide and share with you to help you prepare for just the craziness of midyear. Listed below are some of the resources we feel might be helpful. So Phil mentioned at the beginning of this webinar that we have our great like sister fellowship programs like MCPHS, Rutgers, even Northeastern. They have a ton of webinars that are helpful that really explain what each functional area is, which is very important to know when you're going into interviews. Additionally, there's a unique one that a few friends of friends have created this great website called A27P. That really helps you prepare in terms of, it breaks it down on the website in terms of how midyear actually works, like how CV should be written, cover letters, interviews, letters of rec. They kind of break it down quite nicely, and it's all free, and it's a great resource to really utilize. Additionally, I know Industry Pharmacists Organization has a fellowship catalog to really help you maximize opportunities, whether it be geographically based or based on your functional area. They do a really great job organizing that in case you haven't seen it yet. I know they have some additional resources that might actually charge you for, but I'm pretty sure this one is free still. And finally, I really want to emphasize and make sure all of you are really taking advantage of your own universities, your own university career center, as well as your alumni and preceptors. Before you come to midyear, you should really be reaching out and cashing in on those great networks you've made throughout your pharmacy school career, whether that be reaching out to your preceptors and asking for whether they could review your CV or maybe even do a mock interview with you. And I think mock interviews are at most career centers as well, and really just finding those additional resources to help polish up those final edges before you come to midyear will really make the difference. And so that's all we have prepared for you tonight. I know we still have this is actually pretty good timing. We left almost about 20 to 30 minutes for you guys to answer any questions that you may have. So please feel free to ask us any questions. Oh, awesome. Okay. So we have one question that says, what skills do you most need to acquire or develop to advance your career at Abbey? So I'm assuming this means what skills as a fellow we need to develop in becoming full-time?
Sure, yeah, we can go for that. I think what I personally need to develop is sort of a more business mind. Coming from an academic institution, you're thinking more general, from a health economics outcomes research perspective. You do research just to put it out there. But at a company, a pharma company, you do research to push an objective. And I think learning the strategy behind a product is something that is going to advance my career.
Yeah, I think for me personally, since Phil and I are in different focuses, what I've seen based off of the teams that I work on, as well as people are just successful around me, I think a lot of it is just picking up information quickly, being able to distill information. And really, I think that comes a lot with not only familiarity with our own data, but really taking that extra effort to to ask questions, really, to not only just, if you don't know anything, or if you have a question, not just looking at the thing and kind of absorbing what's given to you, but being curious, constantly wanting to know, why was this done, challenging the status quo, why do we do it like this, and really getting a better understanding for processes, I think is a big learning curve for me coming in, and is something that I think is really welcomed here at Pharmacyclics, is that understanding and openness to really explaining the process, and if something isn't doing or going a certain way, then that doesn't make sense, then they'll be open to changing.
Yeah, and I think going sort of off of that, being reliable is hugely important, especially at a smaller company. I think going into a full-time position, or if they are looking to hire you, you need to be reliable. Can you handle the task that you're given? And you sort of need to prove yourself, but at Pharmacyclics, they really give you the opportunity to do so.
I think a more relevant question would be, as an incoming fellow, something that we really look for is that proactiveness. Given how young our fellowship program is with KGI and how young it is at Pharmacyclics, one thing we really hope for in an incoming fellow is someone to be proactive, excited about the position, and just really there to help not only fulfill baseline requirements, but really to push our fellowship to the next level, come in with ideas and be excited to continue fostering and growing our program.
And there was a question about an opportunity to pursue an MBA or MS. I'll quickly answer that. So I've discussed with Dr. Tyrell or Bernie that possibility, but because this is such a new fellowship, the incoming fellow would sort of have to pave the way for that.
That proactiveness.
Yeah, sort of that proactiveness we were talking about. I've definitely looked into it at the beginning of my fellowship, but then I got pretty much bogged down with all the work to be done here. But if the next fellow wants to do so, I would definitely support them in finding the program and working with Dr. Tyrell to sort of implement that into our fellowship.
Yeah, it's not that it's not possible, it's just that given how new we are, we need someone to really feel passionate about something and to really take that on as a project for them too. So like the UCSF teaching certificate is brand new for Phil and I this year, and something that Dr. Tyrell really helped to advocate for us, and that's something we would hope our next incoming fellow would also consider pursuing.
The next question, what behaviors did you have to change about yourself in order to adapt to the work environment as a fellow? I think there's a lot of procedures at a pharma company. There's a lot of SOPs, standard operating procedures, just following the rules. And, you know, at a pharma company, you're trying to present medical evidence to the outside world. And the FDA is pretty strict on what you can say and what you can't say. So sort of following guidelines is kind of tough.
Yeah. Man, you guys are really asking tough questions. All right, so behavior to change about myself in order to adapt to the work environment as a fellow. I guess this works. So I think coming in as an industry, I remember something that a lot of my peers above me told me was like, oh, going to industry, like work-life balance is great. You can go after work, you go home, you don't have to worry about anything. I think that was probably true during my rotations too. And I was like, this is great. But I would say the amount of work Phil and I are putting in is quite a lot more than I initially anticipated. It really ebbs and flows based off the projects we're working on. And I would say
Congress timelines.
Yeah, like yeah, so like Phil and I are laughing because we have a huge Congress coming up in December that today there's a huge abstract release, and so I've been here since 5:45 a.m. So it's been a long day, but I would say today's the peak. Normally we have great work-life balance, but it really just ebbs and flows. So the behavior change is really ebbing and flowing with those projects.
You might scare people off. Our managers do promote work-life balance, and the culture here, it's definitely easy to fit in. Everyone's super friendly, and they do promote work-life balance.
They do.
Coming in at 6 a.m. isn't normal.
It's definitely not, and it was just an experience I wanted to take on because I hope to eventually be able to take on Congress planning my next year. So this was something that I wanted to get involved in myself, and so it just depends on how much you want to put in or what you want to do. But I agree with Phil. It's not intended to scare you. It's just a behavior change that I was like, oh, you got to ebb and flow and be flexible as you come in and just go with the flow. And that's something that I wanted to point out.
So the next question, how are non-traditional applicants viewed in the application screening process? Is this fellowship program primarily reserved for graduating or recent PharmDs? So that's something we still have to discuss. I know in our slide we said must be a PharmD graduate, but depending on your own background, we definitely look into that. I think. Yeah,
so we're open to also interviewing students who have also graduated a year or two. I think is also considered recent.
Or other non-traditional routes. We'd have to explore that because we are.
I would say go ahead and send your application just to email Phil and I if you consider yourself more of a non-traditional applicant rather than just paying through and going through the PPS process.
The next question, how much emphasis is put on having industry experience, internships, or Abbey rotations prior to applying for the fellowship? It's 100% not required. It's definitely great if you do have those industry experiences, but the most important thing I'd say is relating the experiences that you have into industry fellowships or medical affairs in general. Being able to say, I did X, Y, and Z at, this clinical rotation, but I know how much that goes into a medical affairs position. Anything to add?
No, Phil got it. Yep. So we're not necessarily looking for like the brand name thing on your CV, even though I think direct industry experience is always great. But if you're able to speak well to any other experiences you have and kind of build that story on why those experiences have led you to decide to pursue this fellowship, I think that's ultimately what we're looking for, is that why.
And we understand not all the schools have the same opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Exactly.
Okay. Do you want to read the next one?
Yep. So we have from Andrew, what have been your biggest takeaway from your fellowship experience so far in terms of growth?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Biggest takeaway.
Okay. So, oh my gosh, I think my biggest takeaway right now in terms of growth is being able to be okay with not being comfortable and knowing. And I think in pharmacy school, I always had a ton of time to prepare for either a presentation or some type of project. We always had a very cushy timeline. I think once you come into the industry setting, things move so quickly that I often find that I feel a bit uncomfortable how quickly things move, and I'm like, oh, I don't feel like I have enough time, but it pushes me to move at a faster pace, to think quicker, and I think over time that's helped me push me to become and grow in that sense as well. And so the timelines are shorter, and I think being able to adapt to that and work through it successfully has been a challenge, but something that I think has been one of my greatest takeaways in terms of growth.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's a little abstract, but I'd say adaptability, and I guess using another buzzword, wearing a lot of hats, being able to wear a lot of hats. That's sort of what I've had to do at this fellowship.
Yep. All right, so is it common to continue an Abbey Pharmacyclics post-fellowship? If so, how do the roles change? And so Phil and I are actually this year's first fellows at Pharmacyclics Abbey. And so so we talked about our structure where our first year, it's more of that broad foundational experience where we get to experience different types of functions within medical affairs. Our second year would then transition into more of a focus where we would get more ownership over projects and be able to say that we've been able to lead and take more ownership overall. And I would say post-fellowship, once you've matriculated out of the program, I think the goal essentially would be to stay with the company. I think there's always things to do around here, and our directors have been extremely supportive. I think one thing to also remember is that once you spend 2 years with the company, it's a huge investment for them to train you through the program and to actually invest that time into you understanding their policies and how things work. And so the idea is that everyone hopes that you stay with the program and to continue being a contributing member of the company.
Yeah, I completely agree. Nothing to add on there, to be honest. Okay, next question. What does the onboarding process look like? So I think this is pretty common across the board from my friends that I've talked to at fellowships as well as consulting companies. It's a huge learning curve coming in, and just learning everything there is about the product as much as you can, learning the package insert, learning the clinical trials that are important, learning the studies that are going on. You have a couple of weeks before they throw you in the water. So there definitely is time, and they're definitely supportive of your learning.
Yeah, I think with any company in pharmaceutical industry, just being by nature, it's such a heavily regulated industry that I think most people, when you onboard, you just spend weeks sitting at a computer, going through modules, making sure you're compliant and understanding appropriate policies and procedures. So I think after that, something actually that we did do that I thought was unique and really helpful was that because we're in medical affairs, and because education also sits within medical affairs in terms of medical training, we had a really great 8-week course on Imbruvica and hematological malignancies as a whole. And so we had a coworker who heads education and training internally who was able to provide like an 8-week plan for us to understand the science behind a lot of what our drug does, as well as the disease landscape and the different types of histologies and indications.
I think it was a loosely structured 6-week program, but you're not only doing this training program, you're also doing a little bit of work outside so that you're not, siloed off from the whole company. You're supporting the company, but you're also learning as you go. Right.
It was more of like a background. This is a self-paced. This is how, if you want to know all the information we have available, this is available for you to tap into and to read about. But Phil's right. It's definitely not something where we just focused an entire 8 weeks on. It was more of like a background. Do this when you have like your downtime.
Next question is a P4. How did you leverage non-industry rotations to help prepare you for your fellowship? Like I was saying, there's definitely translatable skills from clinical rotations, things like literature searches.
Different types of journal clubs, just being able to work with different types of people at your whatever rotation it is. Lots of skills that definitely transfer, presentation skills, even being able to solve conflicts in those situations. Really anything that, because we're pretty close to the science and what our PharmD does, like something I mentioned earlier in the slide was that I'm constantly surprised at how many pharmacists are in our medical affairs department. We're essentially run by a pharmacist-based workforce, and so it's kind of cool being able to pull and still utilize a lot of my PharmD even at work here. Of course, it's focused on oncology, but it's still a lot of what we learned and building on that foundation and continuously building on that.
I want to emphasize that Rula, our head of medical affairs, is a PharmD, so she values where we're coming from with that clinical knowledge and our inputs at the company itself. Yeah, so in your P4 year, a lot of your non-industry rotations are still going to be very applicable. And even if you don't have that hematology or oncology direct experience, talk about why you're interested. Why do you want to join a company that's only focused on hemonc? And like, it's a good sense to know whether it's a good fit for you, right? So why, if you join a hemonc company, you're going to be an expert at that, but you're not probably going to know as much about other indications. And just really think about that story about why you may want to join a company, why you may want to pursue a career in that focus, whether it be either direct experience or a personal interest in what that is. Yep. Next question, how can I stand out at midyear? Poster presentations, etc. I think the biggest way to stand out is be able to talk to your experiences. If I ask you something on your CV, be able to talk about what you got out of that experience and how you can relate that to our fellowship program. And I think that's pretty standard across the board, not just our fellowship, but be knowledgeable about the company itself, about maybe their products, maybe current events that are going on, and be able to speak to that, as well as your experiences.
Yeah, I agree. And additionally, being able to say all of that and package it into a nice STAR method, I think has been really effective in how to deliver very concise and impactful types of responses. But poster presentations are great. I know it's a lot to do at mid-year. I think did you have to present a poster?
I did not, but you did, right?
Yeah, I had to present a poster during mid-year, so being able to balance that, it's not too much of a commitment from what I remember.
Yeah, I don't think a poster presentation at mid-year would help you stand out. I wouldn't even know you did it unless
you talked about it. If that's something you're strongly interested in, we'd love to hear about it.
But I guess other poster presentations at other congresses might, depending on how you talk to it.
We're just curious to hear what makes you interested, what makes you excited, and why you love what you do and want to join us. Yeah. That's essentially the root of it.
Yeah.
All right. This one next.
Okay, next question. How much involvement do you have with other departments, commercial, regulatory? If you can, I'd definitely be interested to hear any insight you have about pharmacists' role in marketing. So you work with regulatory and legal.
Okay. Yeah, I can actually talk a little bit more about this. I work a little bit more cross-functionally in the sense that when we do medical reviews, this review is generally led by the regulatory department, and so the reviews we do that they require medical input from is not only educational pieces that our medical affairs team uses, but also commercial pieces. Even thinking about our upcoming Congress, whether it be advertisements, commercials, or even just magazine commercials, anything that people, patients, physicians, anyone outside our company will touch and see is something that medical affairs needs to check off and say that it was medically, scientifically accurate, fair and balanced. And so that's a way that medical affairs and how medical review will interact with regulatory and our commercial counterparts.
As for health economics and outcomes research, we do closely work with market access, but again, there's firewalls and SOPs there, but we do align broadly on strategy without getting into the nitty-gritty.
Yeah, and even with Congress planning that I do as well, we also have a medical affairs booth, but we also have a commercial booth that need to be very separate from one another in terms of the messages we convey, our planning, everything is very separate. But we do interact with them in the sense that understanding, just knowing where they're at and what their themes are, and understanding, oh, where are you guys going to be? This is what that's kind of what we interact as well in a cross-functional team meeting.
On a day-to-day basis, we just see them and say hi to.
On a day-to-day basis, we see them at the coffee machine or the snack room getting free lunch.
Yeah, so we know their faces and we know their names, but.
Yeah, and so I would say being, as a first-year incoming fellow, you'll get that broad exposure, and it's really just testing the water and seeing what are you interested in, and eventually if you find out, hey, maybe med affairs might not be your cup of tea after all, and if there's a certain type of interest, or you might want to do a rotation, you're interested in med affairs, but you're also really curious about this regulatory position you've been seeing, there's a possibility to open up conversation about maybe doing a small project with them or a rotation and trying to coordinate that. So there are opportunities, because as a fellow, you're still technically like a postdoctorate student, you're a fellow, so you can use that opportunity to your advantage.
Yeah, as far as the pharmacist's role in marketing, I'll just briefly touch on that. I guess your pharmacist training really gives you other things besides clinical knowledge. You know, the ability to critically think, review insights and papers, just being able to do that sort of thing and being well-spoken will help you greatly in marketing. And I'd say they don't use clinical knowledge at all, pretty much.
No, I think they still do. We have some PharmDs there. We have some PharmDs in commercial, and I think it gives them an advantage that if you're a pharmacist in a commercial space where you generally don't see a lot of medically trained individuals, it gives you that foot in the door where you kind of have that additional insight that you can bring and that additional perspective.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, we're running a little.
Yeah, we got 6 minutes, so we'll skim through and.
Okay. I actually really like leadership books. So I don't know if you guys have read, who asked this question? Someone asked about sharing any book recommendations on leadership, management, personal development, fun reading, etc. I love reading, so one book that I think is a very classic book for leadership is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I think that book is extremely dense in the sense that every sentence feels very impactful. So reading through that I thought was really great and insightful. I also personally really love Asian American books, so the whole Crazy Rich Asian series has been awesome for me, as well as other Asian American authors.
Yeah, Kaylee's on the other spectrum than I am. I don't really read those leadership books, but I know higher up, like executives do put money on.
Phil can give you good Netflix recommendations.
Yeah,
we can ask him about that later.
A little more cynical, but that's not a good thing, I guess.